Guys, I've got an awesome opportunity to tell you about. You can check out the Go Hunt Insider for free for a 30-day free trial right now. All you got to do is go to GoHunt, that's GoHunt.com/JScott. Look for the blue Start Your Free 30-Day Trial button and click there. This is by far the most valuable tool a Western hunter could give themselves. Insider changes how hunts and hunting information are found. When you go in the Insider, you'll be able to check out the Filtering 2.0 system. You'll also be able to check out the draw odds for each unit, for each animal, for each state. Go Hunt Insider has the best draw odds on the market as far as the most accurate. There's no one that gets this meticulous level of accuracy as Go Hunt Insider. You'll see there's complete coverage of 4,200 different profiles, every unit, every state, every species, every season. In-depth analysis, interactive maps, season trends, unit access, camping and lodging nearby, and historical weather. You'll also be able to see some of the additional benefits, the strategy articles on how to apply, let's say in Arizona for elk, for antelope, for deer. You can go in there and see how in-depth they get. It's an unbelievable opportunity, a free 30-day trial. They also do monthly giveaways, so just by being an Insider member, you get monthly giveaways. They give over $100,000 plus per year of giveaways, gear, tags, hunts. Another unbelievable thing about the Insider is the Go Hunt Gear Shop. So every time you buy something, you accumulate points. In essence, it's giving money back to the Insider. You might ask, well, how does this work with the Go Hunt Insider? How does the 30-day free trial work? You can sign up to try Insider's industry-leading hunting products free for 30 days. They do take your credit card information so that you can automatically become a member once your 30-day trial ends. You can cancel at any time during the 30-day free trial, and it doesn't cost you a dime. You might ask, how is this different from other resources out there? Insider provides analysis and tools for every unit, every species, and every hunt. In each state that they cover, they don't just cover the top 10 units. Their coverage is super in-depth, and you can find those hidden gem units, maybe something that the draw odds are a little bit better, and maybe some quality. It's slipped through the cracks, and you might find a great hunt there. Right now, Go Hunt Insider covers Arizona, Colorado, Idaho, Montana, Nevada, New Mexico, Oregon, Utah, and Wyoming. All you have to do is go to gohunt.com/JScott and check it out now. Since 1992, Herky Jerky has been committed to providing the highest quality beef, buffalo, elk, venison, turkey, and bacon snacks to their customers. Herky Jerky's award-winning jerky and meat sticks are high in protein, low in fat, and carbs, and are the perfect choice for hikers, hunters, anglers, boaters, campers, outdoorsmen, or anyone searching for a quick, healthy snack. All Herky Jerky products are proudly made in the USA with top quality ingredients. When Herky Jerky arrives at your front door, you can be confident that they will be the freshest you've ever tasted. Your satisfaction is guaranteed. For the month of July, it's a generous $10 off any order of $50 or more, and it includes free shipping. You must use the promo code JScott during checkout to get the discount. Go to herkyjerky.com. That's HERKY jerky.com. Check them out.
Welcome to the J. Scott Outdoors podcast. Today we have Chris Rowe of Rowe Hunting Resources. Chris, how you doing?
I'm doing good. Trying to stay cool out here. How are you been?
I'm just trying to get ready and put some last-minute touches on my Dall sheep hunting gear. And
that's coming up. That's what, Wednesday?
Yeah, I leave in a few days, and so I'm excited to. I'm anxious. I'm just ready to go. I'd wish it was tomorrow, and you know, when you look forward to a hunt like this for this long, it's like, you know, you recheck your gear over and over and over, and you're just kind of staring at the wall, ready to get after it. So, yeah, it should be fun. I'll be there for a couple weeks, and then back to Colorado for a couple weeks, and then I'll be off to Alaska again for my Chugach Dall sheep hunt. And then I'll be here for a little while, and then off to the Ot6 Ranch. One of the things about the Ot6 Ranch is the big Spring Creek fire which is, I think as of a few minutes ago, I checked, it was like 106,000 acres that's burned there in south central Colorado, and it's not very far away from the Ot6 Ranch. I've been down a couple times this summer checking trail cameras, putting up new trail cameras, and just checking things out at the ranch. And man, what a difference between this year and last year. Last year was one of the more wet years as far as summer moisture and what have you. And this year it's just been very, very dry. And the whole area.
Yeah, that's why the fire danger is just so bad this year.
I mean, it's been crazy. So right here. Right here by our house in Basalt, there was a couple young people in their early 20s that went and shot tracer rounds up at the gun range there in Basalt and started the Lake Christine fire that's now 6,000 acres. But I mean, could see smoke and flames right here from our house, and almost got the town of El Jebel, which is just west of Basalt, and now it's kind of going back up, in the direction toward Eagle, kind of up Basalt Mountain. But there's a handful of fires actually burning all over Colorado. Fortunately, Arizona hasn't had many start up yet, but that brings us to drought conditions. It's crazy dry here. We've had several questions come in, and I'll dive into that. And one of them, talks about drought and what have you. But any thoughts on these fires? Have you ever seen it, this bad in a while? Just your overall thoughts on, having been a Colorado resident for a long time, drought conditions here.
Well, yeah, it really, and you'll hear people talk about 2002. I mean, 2002 we kind of had similar. It's one of those similar but different type of deals. But no, I think the big thing for people to really be sensitive, especially if you're a non-resident, the reason why, in my opinion, the reason why we're dealing with such a bad, it just seems like every other day a new fire pops up and it just goes. Part of the reason is exactly what you said, is we had a real, across the mountains especially, we really had a good moisture cycle late. And so a lot of that vegetation, the summer, the warm season grasses, and then the fall, the cool season grasses, all just I mean, they were doing phenomenal. I was up at 11,000 plus feet last year in one of the places I elk hunt. And I mean, the Idaho fescue, which is a great forage for elk, especially winter range and everything else, a good cool season grass. That stuff was 3 foot tall. I mean, it was just as big and just as lush as I've ever seen. Some of the vegetation, I was like, oh my gosh, the animals are going to go into this winter exceptionally well. There was just so much food. Well, there you go. You build such a thick amount of grass and low-lying fire starter, if you would, for lack of a better term. Once that dries out, if you don't have rain falling on it and greening it back up and knocking down the old stuff and just starting to kind of break down that old stuff, it is just ladder fuel. It helps. Any little spark, that stuff's going to go, and it's going to cast a good flame, and when it does, it's going to leap up, and it's going to grab the low-lying, pine limbs, and if the pines are stressed, you're done. You're done. And that's why so much of this is just, you get a spark, but before anybody can even get on it, it's already a few hundred acres, and it's just going. And then couple that with, you get a strong, whether you get a west, south, it doesn't matter, you get a strong wind. Oh, goodness, here we go. The problem, and so for me, as a habitat guy, let's even say you, Jay. I mean, you brought up Arizona. Let's bring up a great example. The Kaibab National Forest, and we've got a friend down there that is the head fire guy, one of the head fire guys down at, habitat and fire guys down in the Kaibab. You look at, I remember going back when I was in undergrad school, learning about the Kaibab, the Ponderosa Pine Forest, and just the amount of just unreal, really good stuff coming out of the Kaibab. They do fire. I mean, fire in the Kaibab is just like,
commonplace.
It is, and they do such a good job. And you look at, anytime you say, oh, well, there was a fire in the Kaibab, oh, I know where I'm going, because you get a good rain on that thing, and it's going to bounce back and just be unbelievable. But that's because most of the fires in and around that they're doing end up being, what they classify as a cool or slight or maybe a moderate intensity, to where fire on that landscape becomes a beneficial tool, because it takes away the old stuff, it clears away, it makes the path for new, and it just basically reinvigorates stuff. When we look at what's going on in Colorado now, and same thing with 2002, you look at the Hayman fire, and I'm actually talking with a buddy of mine now that is familiar with that Hayman area. The problem is that,
tell the listeners about the Hayman area, just so that they know where you're talking.
All right, so roughly northwest of Colorado Springs, southwest of Denver, starting from the foothills into, and then west into the mountains a little bit. So you look at, Colorado Springs, Woodland Park, Sedalia, that you look at a map, and it's like I said, northwest of Colorado Springs is the best kind of geographical location for that. It was a low-lying very mountainous, very hilly, very steep hills, but it's all ponderosa pine, oak brush country predominantly. Then you get into some areas that had that thicker white pine, and some other, maybe even lodgepole in there in some places, but mostly ponderosa pine and oak brush type of community. And when that burned, it just launched, and it was a couple 100,000 acres. I mean, or 100. I thought it was like 200,000 acres, but maybe it wasn't quite that. It was big, just gargantuan. And kind of like what you saw with the spring fire, I think the only reason, if I remember, we're talking 2002, so it's a while. If I remember correctly, the only reason why they were able to shut that thing down is because I think it started raining on top of the fire, and it helped. And that's what I heard, with the spring fire. I think that rain that they got on the spring fire just saved everybody's bacon, because I don't think it sounded for a while there that thing was just going to go, and it was going to be another. Is it still like the fourth largest fire in Colorado?
Well, I think it's actually moved up to number 3, and I just Googled the Hayman fire, and it's 138,114 acres, the largest recorded fire. Okay. And, the spring fire is, 106. So, I mean, it could very easily, by the time it's done, it could be bigger than the Hayman fire. An interesting thing about the Hayman fire, a couple things from hearing you talk, is one, last week I was in Colorado Springs for the United States Senior Open Golf Championship, and we were staying there at the Broadmoor. The golf course, or the tournament was being played on the course there at the Broadmoor, and from our room it faced west, and on a bunch of places on the course you could actually look back to the south, and you could see all those hills. What a difference between those hills and then say south of the Broadmoor, where a lot thicker vegetation and what have you. And one of the golfers even asked, he's like, what's that over there? What's the difference in those hills? I'm like, that's where the forest fire came. And he's like, no kidding.
Well, and there you had...
I mean, it almost burned all the way to the city. I mean, literally, they were worried about Colorado Springs in general.
That's a different fire. That was one not too long ago. I know what they had another one. Is that a
different fire?
Yeah, that's a different fire. That was only a few years back. And I'm completely spacing the name of it right now, but that burned literally, out the back door. You're talking Williams Canyon. What the heck was it? Maybe it was Williams fire. Was it Williams fire? Don't quote me on that. No, that was a different fire, but equally just as possibly devastating. Now, and I say that from a human standpoint. It literally it came down the mountain and it got into the suburbs of West Colorado Springs, and it torched a bunch of houses. It got ugly, and it got ugly fast, because that was a lot of heavy oak brush and Mount mahogany in really, really rugged terrain. The sad part about that is, and there's obviously most of these fires have a history. There's a backstory beyond what the fire happened. The sad part about that fire, that with the Colorado Springs one, Forest Service and a lot of other people were telling Colorado Springs, listen, we need to start doing some prescribed burns. We need to do some habitat improvement. We got to do something, because this is going to end someday. It's going to end badly. And Colorado Springs, if my memory serves me, they were the ones that would deny any sort of prescribed burn. Because of the Clean Air Act, because of the size of the city, you'd have to. My understanding, again, I'm not an expert on this, but my understanding is they had to get permission from the city in order to be able to basically buy it, and they had to sign off on any sort of fire or any sort of burn or anything that's going to happen because of Clean Air Act considerations, and the city never would. And there were so many people that were pissed off at the city when this fire went up, because they just blamed the city. They're like, see, told you, we knew this was going to happen. We knew that there was people that the Forest Service and other organizations wanted to mitigate for this. You always said no, and now what? Now our homes are burning. But from an ecological standpoint in that area, when I was on the board of directors for Rocky Mountain Bighorn Society, that's where I lived. I lived in Green Mountain Falls, one of the towns that was evacuated for that fire. I'll tell you, I physically, personally ran a chainsaw and did habitat improvement projects for that. It's called Rampart, the Rampart sheep herd, S34, which is just outside of Colorado Springs. That sheep herd used to be huge. Bighorn sheep, low canyon country, okay? That sheep herd used to be huge, a couple hundred animals. Now it's down to just a handful, because the habitat just started getting old, decadent, just major shrub and oak brush encroachment. This fire did a world of good for the bighorn sheep population from a habitat standpoint in that area. And I know that there's going to be a lot of folks that are looking at these fires, that are going on in Colorado right now, and be like, yeah, this is going to be great, great, great. Well, yes, in some areas, when the Spring Creek fire started, I looked at some of the pictures coming out of it, and I'm like, man, that was it. That burned the meadow, and then it seemed like it started out, maybe it was a grass fire underneath some of the trees, and it looked like I'm like, man, maybe this is going to be good. And then I talked to a friend of mine she works on the Fire Incident Command. She's up on the Chateau fire right now, or what? I asked her, I said, what's the intensity looking like in the spring fire? Well, that's when it just turned, and she said it's bad. Some of the places up there, it's burning, that the heat is so bad that it's sterilizing soil, more than a foot deep under, it's just torching, just nuking the soil and the everything. I mean, it's sterilizing, and that's the problem. If we go back and we look at what happened with the Hayman fire, yes, there are some really beneficial, really good things that happened inside the Hayman burn footprint that really helped ecological function get back on track the way it needed to be. However, there are a lot of places that are now literally ecologically different because of the nature of the fire that went through there. It burned it so badly that it's still slowly recovering. Yes, they went in and reseeded, and that reseeding effort has made a world of difference as far as how much grass cover and vegetative cover is in there. But if they had not reseeded, I mean, we would still be, dealing in a lot of these places with just little patchy shrubs here and there. It's amazing when you go in and you hike around the Hayman fire to see the difference. Now, it's not to say that there's not animals in there. I'm not saying that. But I'm saying it's a different landscape. And it's taken excuse me, it's taken 10, 15 years to become something that it is today. So I mean, some of these fires, the way they're burning, and as hot as they're burning, nature will recover, but it ain't going to be what you expect it to be, and it may not bounce back as fast as what you want. There's people, and this is the other thing too. If you show people pictures, oh look at, here's the Spring Creek fire, and here's a herd of elk that are out in the scar of the fire. Oh, they're already moving back in. Yeah, if your house burns to the ground, do you just walk away and never come back, or do you come back to where your scar of your house was and just walk around and go, what the frickin' heck just happened? My house was just here. So a lot of that initial elk and deer activity that they see back into the scar of the fire is just elk coming back in and this was my bedroom. What the hell happened to my bedroom? This is where we go to eat dinner. This is dinner. This is our restaurant. This is where we eat every night. What the heck? There's no grass here. What's going on? And so they'll wander around for a little bit because they are on a pattern. They know where they get food. They know where they get water. They know where they go to bed. And a fire burns through. All that, the fire disturbs them. The human activity disturbs them. But all of a sudden that disturbance stops. And so they go, well, okay, maybe I go back. And they go back, and then they start wandering around going, crap, now what? And then they move off, and they'll figure it out. They'll figure out where they need to go to make a living for the next, however long. But, yeah, I mean, if on some of these fire areas we start to see a gentle monsoon cycle, meaning where the monsoon moisture comes in, and maybe it's an afternoon rainstorm, but every day we just get a gentle soaker. That's going to be very, very, very beneficial. But if and unfortunately this is what happened in some of the Hayman burn scar area, and it just seems like it happens this way, I think just come the thermal dynamics on the heat and for a variety of reasons. It seems like they get the fire out, and the next rainstorm that comes over is this monster of a thunderstorm that dumps 8 inches in one storm. And it literally takes all the ash, every ounce of topsoil that even thought about hanging on, and it just washes it right to the creek bottom, leaving nothing but just crushed gravel, crushed granite, and rock. And I hope that doesn't happen. If we have the ability to, if the good Lord gives us the blessing of just give me some gentle soakers, just periodic soakers over the top of it. Let's just wet the ash down. Let's just settle the remaining topsoil. Let's just get it soaked. Yes, in some of the areas where we have a low-intensity fire, that grass is going to just explode. The shrubs are going to explode. The aspen shoots are going to explode. Even some of the moderate intensity fire areas, the shrubs are going to jump back. The aspens are going to jump back. We'll have some grasses that jump back. I'm sure that the Forest Service and some of the area conservation stuff are going to go back in and probably do aerial seeding. They usually do, just from if nothing else, from a soil stabilization thing and an erosion control. But if we end up, once you start getting that moderate intensity and then you move into that high or extreme intensity heat, those you'll hear people talk about hydrophobic soils, where basically it makes it to where the water beads up on the surface and runs right off. It doesn't even go in. It doesn't even soak in. And so it becomes this erosion nightmare, bare soil nightmare. That now if you have some ponderosa pine that has lingered in that area, or you had some pine cones that were closed up tight and were released because of the fire, Okay, ponderosa pine does good in that gravel or that granite, crushed granite, gravel type scenario. But man, in some of these places where you have oak brush or locust, the growth form of those species can be problematic, and it can absolutely fundamentally change the landscape structure to where it may actually not even be that great for habitat for critters. So it's going to be interesting to see what bounces back, man,
For sure. I mean, while you were talking there, I looked. It was Waldo Canyon fire and Black Forest.
Go. There it is.
Black
Waldo
Forest
Canyon.
fire. Yeah.
Yes.
There
Waldo
were two
Canyon.
there, a year apart, Black Forest and Waldo Canyon. But
Yep, Waldo Canyon.
yeah, I mean, from a standpoint of, the Odd Six Ranch is fairly close to the spring fire. From what we've heard, the spring fires burn very, very hot. If they don't go back in and do much reseeding or anything like that, in your mind, will it affect and could it impact, say, the Odd Six Ranch where elk, wintering, could they just, they're going to have to go somewhere. Do you think it could, the area near the Odd Six Ranch could see an increase in elk numbers?
That is possible. What I would want to see is what does the migration pattern look like in that area right now. And the reason why I ask that is, say for instance, let's take the south end of the Odd Six and create an imaginary east-west line, okay, that goes up and over the ridge, over to the sand dunes. If there is existing elk movement north to south over that line, and there are some elk that are on the south end of that, and they're over in that Spring Creek region, absolutely, I think you could see a lot of those animals head up and over, and they're going to go where the better habitat is. However, if the population of elk in that area generally always stays south of that line, and they, say they winter further south, or they winter southwest or south, if they winter somewhere else, what I would anticipate is they just move farther in the directions they normally go. You know what I
mean? Seeking what they're looking for, yeah.
That's right. So I'd be curious to know what the movement pattern, the seasonal migratory pattern is in that region, where the, obviously, well, I guess you can't even say obviously, where across the highway there, I'm sure that there's a lot of elk that probably winter and stay south of that highway, but the area that's north there, it'd be interesting to see what their movement pattern is, and if there's connectivity, absolutely they could. And this is, again, you and I have had conversations about habitat stuff on the Odd Six. I'll tell you right now, this is where you sit there, and if me as a wildlife manager, I would absolutely triple down on everything I could do to improve the habitat quality on that property. For no other reason, if you do right now, let's just say the Odd Six Ranch has a wintering population. What do you think? 500 animals? 1,000? How many last year did you think you guys had on the ranch?
Well, about 1,000 resident elk is what we figured, kind of during that time frame of fall. The fall time frame.
Fall to winter. Okay, so if that's the case, that's what's there when you have a full complement of all the habitat that's south of your property. If, in fact, you do have that mixing to where now maybe there's another 1,000 that winter south of there, is that ranch going to be able to sustain 2,000 or even another 500? So from a standpoint, I guarantee there's two types of people listening to this conversation right now. There's some that, the anti-private land people are like, I don't want, screw you and, stacking all those animals down on private. Yeah. Well, the flip side is there's a lot of private property is a lot easier to do habitat improvement projects on than federal ground. Period. End of discussion. That's just a non-starter. So you have the ability, the landowner has the ability to do stuff on that ranch right now with no one's permission. So they don't have to do cultural surveys. He doesn't have to do, a NEPA, he doesn't have to do anything. He just says, you know what, we're going to go in and do this, or we're going to do, he can do that on his private property. So if we all of a sudden have looked and say, okay, it's Spring Creek fire, and this is where, when it's all said and done, I do plan on talking with the fire guys, and pulling a map and taking a look at where, what they map it out. They know exactly what the areas of intensity are versus, light intensity. I want to look at that map. What does the intensity look like? And if it turns out that the north end of that Spring Creek fire was just brutally intense, then me as a manager, I look at it and I'm like, okay, that tells me that the recovery, again, unless they go in and reseed, and we get good moisture on it so that the seed germinates and actually survives, unless all of that merges and comes together marvelously, there's going to be a whole bunch of animals in need of food, period. And
right.
So does that ranch right now have the habitat quality to support an influx of 500 to another 1,000 head of animals or not? And if you have the ability to go in and say, okay, we can go in and we can do the habitat improvement projects to ensure that, or at least to help that, oh my gosh, heck yeah. And it's going to benefit everybody in the long run, because in the short term, that private ranch may actually be the fail-safe for where a lot of those animals can go back to, have sanctuary, have food, they can survive, and then let the Spring Creek area over these next couple of years start to bounce back. And then those, if it does, if the aspens start coming back in, the grass starts coming back in those moderate and low-intensity areas, get a good soaker of rain, sure, those elk are going to jump right back in there. But if it is as brutally intense as what I've seen some reports on, it's not going to bounce back as quickly as some people want, and that's where having the ability to work on what you're talking about, having that private ranch might be golden for that population in that area, from an elk survival and population diet, fitness standpoint.
Just from an healthy elk herd standpoint, it might be a saving grace.
Yeah, exactly.
Chris, let's take a quick break here to hear from our sponsors, and then I want to dive into one of the first questions that we got from a listener. Okay.
Okay, guys, I want to tell you about one of the new sponsors at the J. Scott Outdoors podcast, and I'm excited to tell you about this awesome team of dynamic realtors that I know very well. Dar Colburn, who has been my hunting and guiding partner for over 20 years, has partnered up with my nephew, Jay Pyburn, to create the Colburn-Pyburn team. If you're looking to buy or sell any real estate in the state of Arizona, you can't go wrong with the Colburn-Pyburn team. Dar and I have been in the real estate business for over 20 years together, and my nephew Jay is an up-and-coming realtor that has many sales under his belt and is a phenomenal resource for any person looking to buy or sell real estate in the state of Arizona. Just for the J. Scott Outdoors podcast listeners, if you have any real estate needs at all, if you use the Colburn-Pyburn team, you're going to get a $500 gift certificate from any retail shop of your liking. Kuyu, Outdoorsman's, Sportsman's Warehouse, Cabela's, Amazon, you name it. $500 if you use the Colburn-Pyburn team and they sell one of your properties that you either buy or sell, you get a $500 gift certificate. All you got to do is send an email to colburnpyburnteam@gmail.com and get your real estate needs taken care of. That's COLBURNPYBURN team, colburnpyburnteam@gmail.com. Guys, I'm excited about one of the new sponsors of the J. Scott Outdoors podcast. Canyon Coolers is based right here in Arizona and makes premium roto-molded ice chests that work. The Outfitter Series coolers are made with near vertical exterior walls to fit snugly into tightly packed hunting rigs without a lot of wasted space. They come at a fraction of the cost of some of the big name brands. Canyon Coolers is a small operation. If you have a question, If you have a problem, you can pick up the phone and talk to a human being, not an answering service. Canyon Coolers offers the industry's only Vortex-like warranty, which is completely no fault, no hassle warranty for as long as you own the cooler. How can you beat that? It's literally the last ice chest you'll ever need to buy. Just for the J. Scott Outdoors podcast listeners, you save 10%. All you got to do is go to canyoncoolers.com and enter the J. Scott promo code at checkout, and you're going to get a 10% discount.
Okay, Chris, we've got a question here from on Instagram. It's SCLINE321. Hey, Jay, I have a question about South Central Colorado. I didn't draw, so I'm going back to my old honey hole. This year, I understand this is one of the worst droughts on record. I'm hunting near Pagosa Springs. I'm still headed up the week of September 18th, trying to catch the early rut. If you have another podcast, can you discuss drought conditions? I'm curious how you would hunt it. Will the river count as a water source? How important will it be to find wallows? How will it affect grazing? Thanks for your help. What do you think, Chris?
I think you need to go look at the picture I posted. This is, what is it, a week ago now or some of the latest drought map. Southwest Colorado is just, it's just scary. It's just so dry. It's just bad. So, yeah, I mean, the thing is I listened to how he's phrasing his questions. The thing is I think he knows the answer. Yeah, water becomes key at this point. Again, people, understand, elk, yes, they are going to choose the areas that have the best green up. If there's green grass and forbs and shrubs and stuff around, they're going to migrate or concentrate around those areas. But elk are grazers, and so they can function on some of the older decadent stuff that was around that might be still lingering, especially if you're talking about, some blue grass or those fescues or stuff that hold their nutritive value for longer. But they need water. So my answer to him, my opinion to him is, yeah, that the rivers obviously, I mean, if that's the only place they're going to get water, there's going to be elk utilizing that to get water. But that I would be, and I will be. I mean, it doesn't matter where you hunt in the state right now. Until we start getting some really good monsoons, water is going to be key. So, I guess north central part of the state is not as bad as the central part of the state, and then it isn't even close to what the southern part and southwest part of the state is. I mean, if you go from north to south, it goes from, it's not really that great, all the way down to, oh my gosh, this is ugly. So it's better the farther north you go. So I guess there you go. So anybody's listening, the conditions, habitat conditions just are better the farther north in Colorado you go. But if you're hunting central and southern Colorado, water's going to be key. And if you can find any place that you have water tucked up into cover, up into habitat, somewhere up on the mountain, on a bench, on a little meadow, a little drainage, a little seep, a little spring, a little wallow, whatever. If you can find those little remote water sources, and it's even close to a bedding area or a feeding area, oh my gosh, yes. I want to know where every one of those things are. So water absolutely is going to be key. And then as far as food and affecting grazing, yeah, I mean, I talked about this, it was 2000, the summer, or excuse me, yeah. No, it doesn't matter. We've had some years where you have these squirrely weather patterns where, again, that's the thing with the monsoons. It's not like back east. Kind of back east, you'll have these days where we're going to get rain. And it's like it covers the entire state north to south, and it's a wave that everybody gets rain, and they just get a soaker. That's not what western monsoonal moisture usually is. Western monsoon moisture is big thunderstorms, and that side of the mountain just got 3 inches of rain. My side of the mountain hasn't had rain in 3 months. And literally it is that, I mean, it can be that stark of a difference. If we start getting a cycle where the southwest portion of the state starts getting those afternoon thunderstorms, then it's going to be up to, if you can do some preseason scouting, great. If you have a contact in that area that can kind of keep you in the loop on what's going on, great. Otherwise, keep your face every day glued to any sort of weather app that will allow you to watch, the radar, what rainstorms are going where, because if the rain falls on one side of the mountain but not the other, I can tell you right now where the elk are going to go. Or if the rain, falls on this end of the valley, but this other end, the other end doesn't really get it, guess where the elk are going to go. They're going to go to where the vegetation quality is better. And in the situation where we have out here out west, that can sometimes become spotty, where one area is much better than another area. That's why a lot of times you'll hear people talk, when the season's over. You'll hear people talk, and I've heard this repeatedly, maybe southwest part of the state had a quote-unquote normal moisture cycle year. And so when the elk, Peedway, I talk about this with Rethinking the Rut series. Why, what affects cows cycling into estrus? And so if you've got a normal moisture year and all things are equal, the elk are going to go into, those cows are going to go into that fall cycle on a normal cycle. So the people that hunt down there that have been hunting for years go into their season and they're like, oh yeah, it was awesome. It was just like I expected. But then meanwhile, you talk to somebody that hunts up in the White River National Forest or, you say the central part of the state, and they're like, goodness frickin' gracious, I couldn't buy an elk until the last part of the season. And then you'll talk to somebody who was up in the Drought National Forest up on the, on the border of Wyoming, and they're like, late? What, are you kidding me? There was nothing going on late. It was all early. And so you sit there and you'll have hunters start arguing with each other. You're an idiot. You don't even know what you're talking about because, hey, you're 3 different areas of the state having 3 different types of environmental factors that affected the elk rut. It changes. Well, that part of it is when we look at what the rainfall does, especially on these dry years, man, they will move to where the green up is. They are going to try to choose the best location that they can. And in this case, I mean, goodness gracious, we could, I mean, anybody that's a subscriber to the Elk Module who's watched that, the Rethinking the Rut series knows exactly where I'm headed on this one. But, I talk in that series, everybody always talks about a late rut. Well, there's really only one thing that causes a late rut, really, from an environmental factor. But there's a whole bunch of other things that will actually pull elk to cycle early. Well, the one thing, the primary thing is poor body condition. So from the cow, if they don't have that roughly 9% body fat composition, they're not going to cycle normally. Well, here we are. If the vegetation has been that bad this summer because of high drought conditions, and those cows still are nursing calves, so they're putting energy into those calves, we very well could, in some areas of the state, see cows cycling maybe a little later than normal. So I guess that's something to consider for him. He said, what did he say? He's heading out the 18th?
Yeah, and that was a couple things. There's a couple things that I want to point out about. He's talking about going out the 18th. I don't know if that's from a work standpoint or if he's thinking that's going to be the best part of the season. One thing I would make sure he understands is the moon is full on the 25th, and it's a new moon on the 8th or 9th, and depending on where he's going, exactly obviously like what Chris is saying is, watch the weather and see where the water's hitting exactly. I can't reiterate that more. Like you take Unit 9 in Arizona or Unit 10 in Arizona, if you can monitor throughout the summer exactly where those clusters of storms have hit, and in your summer scouting when you're driving around, literally try and gauge, okay, this part of the unit has seen dry, and make notes of it. Okay, this part of the unit from here to here seems like, I drove through here and they've got puddles everywhere. Okay, let's come back in a week or two and see if, okay, all of a sudden we've got a big green up. I see it a lot in Arizona, especially in 9 and 10, and those, especially those two arid units. Like it can make all the difference in the world. Unit 9 specifically, like you've got that highway that splits the units into a east and a west half. I've seen it where most of the elk are on the west side one year, and the very next year most of the elk could be on the east side, as well as they could be north or they could be south. I mean, the elk will literally bounce around and try and find the best feed possible. So, Chris, I think you're giving good advice, but I think not only to Colorado, it applies to New Mexico, it applies to Nevada, it applies to Utah. I mean, in general, anybody elk hunting, follow where those fresh green-ups are, and you're going to find more elk. You're typically going to find more cows, and if you're hunting during the rut, you're going to find more bulls. The other thing would be, he's talking about coming and hunting, starting on the 18th, leading right into a full moon on the 25th. I might say, hey, maybe you consider coming a few days early, maybe that 10th, 11th, 12th, 13th, 14th, 15th, 16th, 17th, 18th. And, we've had the discussions about hunting during the moon and all that stuff. But with drought conditions, one would say, okay, well, maybe we need to go later because the cows aren't going to be as fleshy. They may not cycle. So, I mean, I could play it either way. What are your thoughts as far as, picking a later date because you think maybe the cows might cycle at a later period, Chris?
Yeah, see, and that's kind of, if it was me, and it's kind of funny, since I've got to go to Arizona and guide this year, I don't personally have my own flexibility on when I hunt during the season. However, I think I probably would. Well, now you're talking about person. See, I love to hunt early. I like hunting when the bulls are just breaking up out of their bachelor groups. I like hunting bulls that have fewer cows around them. So I really do like earlier rather than later, personally, for my own personal hunts. However, if I wanted to hunt when the bulls are likely going to be bugling more, then yes, I would seriously, me personally, I would probably lean towards the later half of the season this year if I was hunting in the southwest, southern part of the state.
Of Colorado.
Of Colorado at this time, if nothing changes, if the drought continues, then I probably would lean towards a little later. I actually am not too worried about the full moon. Some of the best bugling activity actually can be around that, so sometimes you can use that bright moon phase to your advantage if you know what you're doing. And we've talked about it. I talk about it quite a bit on the elk module. So I'm not so worried about the full moon portion of it. He's picking a time period that goes over that fall equinox, and there's a lot of people that think, well, the fall equinox is what kicks a lot of things in gear. Well, yeah, photo period, yeah. But body fat composition is a big driver on, photo period might flip the switch, but if there's no, imagine, there you go. Imagine a motor that has electric start. Photo period is flipping the switch. But if there's no gas in the tank, it ain't firing up. So
Right.
photo period might allow the hormonal change to happen, but if she doesn't have that body condition, she's not going to cycle. And so she might come in late, or she might miss it, or whatever. But that's where I would start to lean towards, okay, I'll err on the side of caution and maybe push my hunt a little later if I'm going in the southern part of the state, just to hedge my bets against that.
And you mentioned the drought map. I actually, about an hour or so ago on my Instagram story page, I posted a picture of actually the whole western U.S. And
Nice.
if you look at southwest Colorado, like where he's talking Pagosa Springs, like it's maroon, like it's the darkest, the worst color of all, showing the worst, most severe drought, extreme drought. But then, you know, you take, if you take Colorado and just cut it in half, north to south, pretty much from the middle line up, it's not too bad, to be honest with you. And then as you get up into Wyoming, I mean, some of Wyoming and Montana, were 150, 160, even 200% of normal.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of those guys in Wyoming and Montana, like, the rivers still in Montana are, barely floatable and fishable, and, they've got tons of water up there. And then if you look at that same map, northern New Mexico is super dry, northwest Arizona, there's that whole swath of maroon line there that just, doesn't look good. Chris, another thought or question that he had was, or part of that question was, will a river count as a water source? And I'd say absolutely. I mean, any water, a stock tank, a water trough, but a river, live water, of course. Elk love streams. They love rivers. Live water for sure. And then he says, how important will it be to find wallows? Well, for me, and Chris, I'll want you to weigh in on this, wallows are fantastic if the temperature is hot. So not necessarily having a huge deal or significance with drought conditions, more along the lines of if the week that you're hunting or the week before you're hunting that it's been fairly dry, not a lot of moisture, it gets warm, gets hot, I find that those elk really hit those wallows hard because they're trying to cool down. It really, in my mind, the elk, hitting wallows has nothing to do with what happened over the whole summer. In my mind, it has more to do with in the immediate vicinity of your hunt time frame, in the last 2 weeks, has it been real hot and dry? Well, if the answer is yes, then yeah, wallows are huge. If it's, rain everywhere over the last 2 weeks, going into your hunt, and there's puddles literally everywhere, and there's water everywhere, then, wallows are going to be harder because there's more water around. Why don't you weigh in on that wallow situation, Chris?
Yeah, and it depends on what the nature of the specific nature of the question, of what his intent was in that question, because elk don't necessarily need wallows. They from a physiological standpoint, they don't need wallows. They will use wallows. They love to have wallows, but they don't need them. They'll roll around in dry dirt. They'll piss in the ground and roll around in dry dirt. You'll hear people talk about dry wallows. You'll see that in Arizona a lot. They don't need a wet wallow. They love them, and they will use them. They don't need them. So if they're not, if there just aren't any wallows in the area, that doesn't mean that there's no elk in the area. As long as they're able to get water. So if it's say you have a river and there's good elk habitat everywhere around that river, but there's really no free water anywhere that they can get muddy, it doesn't matter per se. That the elk are still going to be somewhere around there. Most of the time, he might be just talking about, do I need to find wallows, as in, do I need to find those little water, if an elk is not going to drink out of a river, do I need to find some other water source like a wallow or spring or something like that? If the river is there, the elk will use it, but they will use any other water source that they can find as well. So I look if that's how I evaluate wallows and whether or not I want to actually hunt them or sit them or whatever. Because again, if people have not experienced Arizona, this is one thing that I hope your podcast and having these discussions at least will help. One of the cool things about Arizona is you just don't have rivers everywhere. You know what I mean? So most of the water.
How about nowhere?
Yes.
You don't have them anywhere or everywhere. You don't have them anywhere. I mean, maybe Unit 1, maybe Unit 27, but pretty dang limited for sure.
I was thinking, that's what I was saying. I was thinking over on that east side, but
and what we would call a river in Arizona is by far, not up to Colorado and Wyoming
creek.
And Montana standards. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it's a creek. When you can hop, skip, and jump across it on walking across rocks and never get your foot wet. Yeah. So, but what you do have is a lot of man-made water, and you have in Arizona you've got some that are in earthen dams, which you guys call tanks, but they're basically a stock pond, dirt pond. Then you have some water that are in little concrete metal drinkers, like a cattle tank or a little tiny water source there. So the elk have the ability to utilize those stock ponds as wallows and go play around in those water sources, but they will also absolutely use those man-made little metal drinkers. And so, but you will watch just how far elk will go from bedding to one of those little physical drinkers. I've literally followed them 1.5 miles, and I'm not pushing them. I'm just shadowing, listening, watching where are they going. It is not uncommon to watch elk move from where they got water and where they're feeding to their bedding area and go 1 mile, 1.5 miles, or 2 miles from where they were getting water. And there may be a whole bunch of different animals coming to the same water source. And at night, it just becomes this, what you guys, I remember the first time I heard you call it that, Jay, a meatball. Just where you get just this, there's like 3 different harems and herd bulls and satellite bulls all converging on one water source. Sometimes they commingle. Other times they'll just take their turn. They'll all kind of stand back, and then one group will go in, and they'll get their stuff. Meanwhile, the other two groups are kind of hanging out there. Everybody's bugling, going, screaming, going crazy. And then the one group gets done, they move off. Okay, the next group comes in, they utilize it, and then by morning, they just drift off, and they all go their separate direction. But it's amazing how far they will travel daily from water to feeding and bedding. And that's not even what I would consider in those critical years. So if we get in those situations where, goodness gracious, we're in an exceptional drought or whatever, do not overlook the fact or take for granted that you might have elk, and they might be doing it in the cover of darkness. They might be moving more than 2 miles daily. At night, you go grab water, tank up, and then head back, and they go back up into their wherever they spend the rest of the day and feed and do all that stuff. But they might move long distances. So now, if he says he's going back to his quote-unquote honey hole, which tells me that's an area that he's hunted before, that he knows, I will absolutely hammer what I always hammer. You expand your area, man. Yes, this particular drainage and that particular ridge, but you might want to look at the next valley over and the next valley after that, and you want to look at those 2 ridges. Expand your visual image on where you're going to look, because they might spread out a little bit, and they might move a heck of a lot farther than you anticipate.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. One thing I might throw in as a little bit of a tip there, it's you were talking about water sources and what have you. You talk about elk taking their turns. If you hear elk splashing, you're close to a water hole, and you literally can hear a bull splashing in the water. You'll see them with their front hoof. They're splashing water under themselves, or if you hear cows, running in the water, you want to get as quickly as you can, as close to that tank as you can, and you want to take that noise that those elk are making and let that kind of muffle and cover your sound as you approach. But yeah. I wouldn't hesitate to get there pretty quick. But as you're moving in, trying to get close to the water hole, obviously you're moving your feet fairly fast, but you're also scanning really heavy with your eyes, because a lot of times there'll be other elk that are 30, 40, 50 yards, just kind of grazing and feeding. But it a lot of times does give you a great opportunity to, get over there and see what's going on, and don't necessarily be as worried about your noise. More be concerned about other elk maybe, that aren't in the water splashing but might be around. And if you hear bulls fighting in a tank and you hear just, lots of commotion, use that opportunity to slide over there and see what kind of bulls, are in the tank and what they're doing. And then a lot of times, even if you're not in range, I mean, you almost have a 50-50 shot if you just get pretty close, trying to determine what those bulls are, if any of them are a shooter, and then you have a pretty good chance that they're going to either come out of the tank when they go to leave by you, or, they may go dead away, but they could walk literally right by you. I've had elk where I've snuck up to the tank and they come walking up over the dike of the tank and literally walk right by me.
Yeah, and we've talked about it before, but it's good to reiterate. Do not think that the only time that they're in there is at night. I mean, depending on where that water source is, especially if you get in, got somebody trying to call me. If you find that water source that's in close to a bedding area, if it's in close to some really good cover, man, do not think that they won't be out there in the morning. They might be at there 10 o'clock in the morning. They could be out there at any time. So if you end up getting it, and this happened a couple seasons ago with me and a client down in Arizona, they weren't talking. It was slow. There's just you just couldn't buy an elk to try to call it and get it to talk with you. But they were hitting water, and we decided. I said, you need to sit in this blind on this water hole. And we got in there at 4 a.m. and he stayed there. The first day he was like, "Why am I climbing into a ground blind at 4 a.m.? They don't hit water until the afternoon." I'm like, no, get in there. And he had elk in front of him almost constant the entire day, just because the location was good. It was a water source that was close to a couple of different bedding areas. So if you find, for this individual, if he's out there scouting or if he's hunting, and all of a sudden you come across just a smoking hot wallow, buddy, I absolutely would camp on that thing, because you might have more than one group all coming to that water source. And again, they all, bulls want to keep themselves separated from other bulls. Cows oftentimes will want to keep themselves separated from other cows. So they might automatically just segregate themselves, their utilization of that water source temporally from a time standpoint. So some might come in the morning, others might come in the afternoon, and others might come in the middle of the night. Get there and camp on it and see what ends up happening.
For sure. The listener also asked the question about how does it affect grazing. I think what he's talking about is how does cattle grazing affect in a drought? Well, again, back to what we were saying about green ups, the elk are going to go where the fresh grass, where the best feed is. And I've said before that, elk, if they have a choice, they're going to feed in a different pasture. If there's just cattle everywhere and they're pounding it, they're going to move over and find where they're not, they'll feed right next to cattle and no problem. But if they have a choice, if, say, there's a pasture fence and all they got to do is hop over the fence, they're going to feed over on the non-cattle side of the fence. As well as if you find an area that's, been pounded by sheep or pounded by cattle, and, there's just, everywhere you look, there's cattle. I would keep searching the next pasture over, try and find where those fence lines are, try and find where those wire gates are, and to be like, okay, what's it look like? Okay, there's grass over here, and there's no grass on this side. The elk are probably going to be on the side of the fence where the grass is. But one thing you have to watch too is when cattle are, densely in an area in the summer, and then we've been having monsoon rain or what have you, and then the ranchers move the cattle off. If the moisture is right, a lot of times within about a week, there will be fresh grass that is coming up, and those elk will very quickly move right back in there, right in behind the cattle. Curious if you had any thoughts on that, Chris.
No, you absolutely nailed it, because that was going to be what I added, and you covered it. The thing I think he ought to do, the only thoughts I would add to that entire statement are two things. One, if he's talking about cattle grazing, and if he's talking about cattle grazing on public ground, Forest Service, down there it's mostly Forest Service, pick up the phone, call the Forest Service, find out if they even turned cattle out into that allotment. See if they even allowed grazing this year. They may have not even opened up the allotment because there was no food. So pick up the Forest Service and talk to them and say, did anybody turn cattle out into this area? Yes or no? And if yes, okay, when did they put them in, and when are they supposed to get them out? When are they getting out? Because sometimes, even though they might open it, they may only open that allotment for half the time that it normally is, just because there's just no food. So utilize that resource. Call the Forest Service, and get a hold of the department that manages the grazing allotment, and ask them, are there cattle in there now, or will there be? Because there may not. But you're absolutely right. If the rains come, then you might be better off in a place that had grazing. If the rains do not come, then you might be better off in a place that did not have the grazing. So that's where you're going to have to keep track of the weather and call the Forest Service and find out what's going on from the cattle standpoint. If he's just talking about elk grazing, then I think we've covered it. They're going to go where the better quality vegetation is.
For sure. A couple things I'd also like to point out about drought conditions, and this is coming from someone that literally spent 20 seasons, in Arizona, chasing those elk around, videoing them, what have you. If you've got an Arizona, New Mexico, maybe even southern Utah tag, southern Colorado tag, if you've got some of these limited entry units, some of these units, the historic units, 9s, 10s, 3Cs, 1s, some of the better units in Arizona, some of the better units in Utah, some of the better units in Nevada. If you're dealing with drought conditions, and I'm just telling you guys to literally slap yourself here and listen, you have to adjust your expectations for what you're expecting on a hunt. And I've heard it over and over and over. Well, I waited 22 years to draw this tag, and I drew this tag, and my answer to them is, well, that's great. You've drawn a tag in a drought year, and you've got your tag in your pocket, but that does not mean that you are going to see the quality of bulls that you might have seen on great moisture years. And I would argue with anybody out there, and we'll be talking about more of this on the podcast when I get back from the Dall sheep hunts, but if you have an Arizona tag this year, you better have expectations that are not as high as it would be in a good moisture year, because these bulls can be 10, 20, 30, even 40 inches smaller than they were last year. And I'm betting that this is going to be more like a 2002. The last really bad drought we had was 2002. The other thing you have to adjust your expectations for is the amount of bugling. In 2002, the bugling was widespread across the state, it was not very good. So you've got a situation where antler growth is not very good. You've got a situation where bugling is not very good. And your encounters become way more important, whereas on a good year, you've got elk running all over. You've got, you're boogering these elk. You're moving over on these elk. You booger those. You go find these elk, and they're bugling. I'm telling you guys right now, you should expect for a knockdown, drag-out, long fight that you're going to have on these archery elk seasons in some of these states, New Mexico, Arizona, maybe even Nevada, maybe even southern Utah. It's going to be tough. I'm telling you right now, I've had some people try and argue with me, and I may be wrong. I hope I'm wrong, but I don't think I'm wrong. So adjust your expectations. It doesn't matter how many years it took you to draw the tag. It's not even a relevant point. All that is, how long you had to wait to get the tag. Unfortunately, you've now drawn the tag on a year that's pretty rough. The other thing I would tell you is if you've used your point guard option and you did buy a point guard where you spent the $5, and let's say you're looking for, say, a 370 bull or better, well, let me tell you, you're going to have a hard time in Arizona this year finding 370 plus bulls. So, I mean, if that's what you're basing your quality of hunt on, or if you won't have fun unless you're chasing a bull of that caliber, in my opinion, I can already tell you right now that you might consider using your point guard. Now, if you drew with let's say 10 points or less, then you've got really nothing to lose. But at some of those guys that have 18, 19, 20, 21, 22 points, and this is your one time to draw your Arizona tag, and you've done that, I'm sorry, but you've drawn on a bad antler growth year, and whoever your outfitter is or whoever you're hunting with, start looking at the trail cam pictures right now, and start trying to make the determination whether you want to proceed with your hunt, or whether you want to use your point guard and push it off to the next year. Because if you have all those points, you're in essence, you're just going on an elk hunt, and you're not going to get, in my mind, you're not going to get the true Arizona experience of multiple 350 plus bulls during the hunt, and everybody's had a glimpse of a 360 to 370, 380 type bull, maybe even better. Chris, your thoughts?
There is literally nothing for me to add. That's you nailed it.
Did I just deflate your balloon?
No, well, no. I literally. It's funny. I was planning here shortly to make a phone call to my hunter this year, and the folks I'm working with, and talk to them, because if all of a sudden I got a phone call and he was like, I'm thinking about turning my tag in, I literally would be like, no worries, brother, I understand. I mean, literally, I at this point have been shocked that I haven't gotten that call. I'm serious, because that exactly. If you've drawn your tag with max points, you've got an investment, man. You've got an investment in that, and just on random of all randoms, you're going to get a bum deal. If you've got that point guard, I don't know. You know me, I love being down there. I love hunting, and I don't even need antlers. I just love mature animals. But golly, you're talking 20 years, and then all of a sudden a bum deal. You get a year where it's just poor. I can't blame anybody for just taking that and going, yeah, maybe I'll turn it in this year and I'll play my cards and see what happens next year, because that's tough. I mean, so no, absolutely. I think everything you said is right smack dab on the money.
Well, and I think too, some people will say, well, we've already got a big bull on trail cam. Great. I'm not saying that there's not going to be a couple across the state that, a couple good bulls. Because there always is.
Well, and that's.
But in general, I've seen it, and I've been out there every elk rut for a long, long time, and I've seen the good and the bad. And I'm telling you, Arizona on a drought year is tough. So if you've got a fairly random draw. You had very little to lose. Like, go and have a great time, but adjust your expectations of, hey, I'm not going to see a 350 bull every single day. And some of the Colorado and some of the Idaho guys were listening, going, listen to these babies. They're sitting there whining about not seeing a 350 bull, but when you routinely go out and elk hunt and see a 350 bull every single day, you get used to it. What I'm telling people is adjust your expectations and go, okay, this is going to be a little bit different hunt. I drew with 5 bonus points. I really have nothing to lose. I'm going to really get mentally tough and going to go in and have a great elk hunt. I'm going to adjust my strategies. I'm going to adjust the way I hunt. I'm going to realize that I have to probably be a little more ginger with the elk. I can't, just blow and go, that I have to treat every circumstance, every encounter with an elk, as this may be one of my best shots. And don't take any days for granted where, when it's good and everything's wet and antler growth through the roof and bulls are screaming, like in Arizona, you literally can just start, picking a place on a map and go, I'm going to go here. Of course, you'll hear 4, 5, 6 bulls bugling.
Yeah.
On a drought year, I've seen it where, John McClendon on one of his videos, he talks about, I forget what year it was, but where he had a early muzzleloader hunter in Unit 10, and he's like, I think what he said is he went the whole archery season and never heard a bull bugle during daylight hours, and then he finally heard a bull bugling on the muzzleloader hunt, and they shot it. Like, here's a guy that spends as much time, he's spent double the time that I've spent as far as number of years, and I've heard multiple situations where guys have gone drought years and literally not heard an elk bugle during daylight hours. So if you're prepared for that, then you can hit the ground running and have a great hunt.
Yeah, and that's the thing, is if people that are listening to this from other states or that don't put in for these premium, tags and units, again,
they're just shaking their head.
well, no, I mean, they can shake their head because they're shaking their head from a standpoint that is not. They're comparing apples to oranges. They're comparing their apples to someone else's oranges, because you're not putting in Unit 9 Arizona or Unit 10 Arizona because I want to kind of go on a cool elk hunt. No, that's
right.
That's not what you're doing. It's like someone in Colorado saying, I'm going to put in for Unit 2, 201, 10, Unit 1. If I can find a nice 5-point, I'd be happy. No, you're not putting in 20 years because you want to, go and have a camp that you might be able to shoot a 5-point. That's not what we're talking about. So, yeah, I'm looking at the fact that, for my personal hunt, most of the states and most of the area in Colorado where I hunt is in that, it's in the southern 2/3 of the state. So even I'm looking at it going, I'm still going to hunt. And that, I guess, and I kind of laughed at myself because that's another discussion you and I were going to have. But, I'm still going to hunt. But, I'm over the counter. So I am. My expectation is I want to go have the experience of just going out and elk hunting and see if I can't put an elk on the ground. But, when we're talking about putting in for 20 years for a certain class and age or whatever, and an animal and a certain experience, well, okay, 20 years, that's a hell of an investment, so be a little picky. And then you said about the game cameras and people showing pictures of big bulls. Well, you and I know exactly. I mean, that's the number one thing that I just kind of laugh with some of these outfitters with the pictures, because, they'll share a picture and they won't share the date timestamp. Oh, look at this! We got this picture of this bull. Really? Is that bull even still alive, or was that picture taken like 2 years ago? And then even if you took a picture right now of that giant bull on that water hole, I mean, look at the giant bull at Flair. Was it last year or the year before? Got killed 23 miles from where he summers. Yeah. I mean, these bulls
summers
move.
in 9 and got killed in 7 less. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I mean. So some of that stuff I look at, I laugh, because I'm like, okay, yeah, people just don't understand that, yes, the bull is there, but that's, again, this whole issue with trail cameras, you're in the summer, you're catching the bulls on their summer range. not necessarily where they rut. And so, yeah, we got a picture of a big bull. Whoop-de-doo, because he's going to be 15 miles from here in the blink of an eye. As soon as those antlers start to harden up, he looks at his watch, he goes, zip, I got to go. And then 2 days later, he's not even the same county.
Yeah, exactly. Let's take a quick break here.
Guys, I want to thank KUIU.com, that's KUIU.com, for their sponsorship of this podcast. And KUIU Ultralight Hunting makes the best ultralight hunting products on the market today. From items like the Peloton 240 full zip hoodie, the Chugach NX rain jacket, and the Super Down Ultra jacket, which will be going on my hunts to the Northwest Territories here soon. If you're talking about KUIU pants, some of the pants that I like are the Guide pant. That's for colder weather hunts, like down in January on my Coues deer hunts. You've got the Tiburon pant for the warm season hunts. That's got the air dock technology where it breathes really well. You've got the Attack pant, which is probably their #1 selling pant. You've got their new Pro pant, which is their all-season, all-terrain hunting pant with a new quiet ultra suede foam lined knee pad. It has 4-way stretch. It only weighs 19.6 ounces. It's got the Toray DWR water repellency. It's got the Toray Make Spec for odor control. KUIU's rain gear is the best on the market in my opinion. I routinely wear the Chugach NX rain pant and rain jacket. I also have worn on some of the lower 48 hunts the Ultra NX rain pant and jacket. Some of the other pieces you've got to check out are the Peloton, which is their synthetic version, either the 130 zip-off bottoms or the 200 zip-off bottoms. They also make them in a 145 merino wool or a 210 zip-off bottom merino wool. These are so convenient. You can leave your boots on, you just drop your pants, unzip your long underwear, and you're off and running again. Another amazing product are the Tiburon shorts. If you see any of the pictures of me in the summer on my Instagram account, 99.9% of the summer I'm wearing Tiburon shorts on all my hiking, all my fishing excursions. It's got the air dot technology. They breathe really well. They're very well fitted, and you guys should check them out. The Tiburon short, fantastic product from KUIU Ultralight Hunting. KUIU has an amazing selection of products from jackets and vests, pants and shorts, shirts and tops, footwear, accessories, lifestyle apparel. They have a wide range of packs from the Icon Pro to the Ultra. The sleep system, the KUIU sleeping bag I use on all my hunts, and then the tents, the Mountain Star 2-person tent, the Storm Star tent, just phenomenal gear. Make sure to go to KUIU, that's KUIU.com, and check out all of the phenomenal gear that they provide. I want to thank the outdoorsmans.com for their sponsorship of my podcast. I want to let you guys know they are the optics authority, and if you're looking for any binoculars, spotting scopes, rifle scopes, make sure to get a hold of the guys at the Outdoorsmans. If you use the JScott promo code, you get a 10% discount on all Outdoorsmans products. Go to outdoorsmans.com or you can call them at 1-800-291-8065.
Okay, Chris, we've got another question. This one should be fairly easy to answer and shorter than the last response. It says, this is from Joey Weem, W-I-E-M on Instagram. I have a question, and maybe it can be a podcast question for you and Chris. Is it your experience that when a bull is raking a tree that its eyes are closed, giving the hunter an opportunity to rush in close? I heard this somewhere and wanted to cross-reference it. My answer to that would be, anytime you're out there elk hunting and you hear an elk actively raking a tree where you can hear the brush, you can hear the antlers against the tree limb, and or if you hear two elk fighting, whether it be, clicking antlers or actively, really aggressively fighting, I would tell you from a standpoint of trying to get in close, yes, if I hear that, I'm going to be kind of like moving in on the water hole where if you hear splashing, I'm going to be moving quick with my feet, scanning fast with my eyes, but trying to close the distance as fast as you can. Are their eyes closed when they're very aggressively fighting? their eyes actually like roll back, and yes, I've seen it where their actual eyes are open, but they're rolled back. I've seen them with their eyes open. I've seen elk when they're rubbing. It seems like the more aggressive that they start rubbing, the more that they do close their eyes and or kind of protect their eyes. And I have been able to literally sneak up where you could almost touch the elk when they're rubbing. When you hear the noise, your feet are moving. When you don't hear the noise, you immediately stop. When they go back to rubbing, your feet are moving, because a lot of times they're going to rub, then they're going to stop, and they're going to look around at their eyes. They're going to keep their antlers and their head where they're rubbing the scent and all the scent gland up on the trees. They're literally going to have the branch bent over, but they're just going to stop. They'll kind of look around, then they'll go back to rubbing. So for me, it's a matter of timing. When you hear the noise, you're moving. When you don't hear the noise, you have to stop. And it's not like you stop 5 or 6 seconds after you hear it. As soon as you hear it stop, you stop. And the closer you get, the keener you have to be on timing exactly when you hear the noise, when you don't hear the noise. And I will tell you that I prefer, if I can put my binoculars on them, and if I can see that the elk's butt is to me and he's rubbing his antlers, I would venture to bet that you could literally, if he keeps rubbing, you can go get as close as actually tapping him on the butt. I've not actually done that, but I've been almost as close to just literally touch them. When they're facing you, you have to be a lot more. You have to pay a lot more attention to that time when they stop, because they do open their eyes and they kind of look around and then they go back to rubbing. Chris?
Yeah, absolutely. The only thing I'm going to add to that is, and I'm going to pay attention to what they are rubbing on. So, Jay, what you're used to, I mean, you down where you spend a lot of time hunting, now you've got pine trees, but you got those junipers and that type of stuff too. So,
I thought you were going to say cactus.
Exactly. They were rubbing on cactus.
Yeah.
So, but if they're rubbing on stuff that has a lot of low-lying branches and or if they're rubbing into some shrubs and it just the more nasty branches and stuff that they're tossing around, the more likely they're going to have their eyes protected and closed to a certain degree. But you can also hear bulls. They'll be rubbing on a nice smooth pine tree, or they've already rubbed all the low branches off, and they're just scraping the bark of a sizable tree. Well, there's really nothing flying around per se. They're just rubbing and just playing around. If that's the case, then their eyes are probably going to be more open. So take a look at what they're rubbing on. If they're thrashing branches and stuff around, more likely they're going to have their eyes closed. And then I agree everything that you said, Jay. If there's motion, you are in motion. As soon as they stop, you stop. The other thing I would say is, if you can, to the greatest extent possible, and I'm almost willing to lean in the direction of, I would almost be willing to flirt with my wind a little bit, but go in a direct route. Go straight at them. Straight
at the noise.
Yeah, straight at it. Don't worry so much about, kind of swinging around downwind. If their eyes are open, if you're doing lateral movement while they're rubbing, if their eyes are open, they will catch that lateral movement. They'll stop and they'll look. But their depth perception, especially out of one eye, is poor. So movement that is moving straight at them is going to be much, much more difficult for them during that. While they're doing that, is going to be much harder, almost impossible for them to pick up on versus lateral movement. So if the wind isn't quite perfect, but it could work, but it might not be perfect, I would move straight at the animal rather than move laterally trying to get the wind right. I think you're better off just moving straight at him, close the distance right now, move in, get set up, and if he's, especially he's broadside or quartering away from me or whatever, he gives you a shot opportunity, smack him. But yeah.
Yeah, and I'll take that even further. If you hear him aggressively raking, like, go straight at the noise and go as fast as, like, at times I've literally take off running.
Yeah.
And then, of course, I'm waiting to hear if he's going to slow down. If he starts slowing down his raking, I start slowing down. As well as back to the fighting portion, if you hear elk aggressively fighting, like, I mean, dirt clod flying, fighting, which I've been fortunate to be very close to many times, and you literally don't care about wind, you don't care about anything. You run to that fight as fast as you can get there. You go in a direct line. The noise you hear when you hear them clanking, the whole time you're running, you're listening to them fight. You're trying to close the ground as fast as possible, because they absolutely do not care about anything. I can't tell you how many times I've literally ran up on elk and they're 15 yards away and I'm just standing there. I ran up there. Other elk have scattered out. Those two bulls that are aggressively fighting, they could care less. Cows
they don't even know. Yeah, they don't even know.
Go in there with, I charge in there and run in there just as fast as I can. And the whole time I'm trying to evaluate, is one of these bulls a shooter? Like, I'm eyeballing it, but I'm trying to get as close as I can, because then if it is a shooter, then you try and just decide, do you shoot them when they're locked up? Do you shoot them when they break apart? But you can get very, very close to elk. And then back to the raking, it's deadly. If you hear them raking and their butt is to you, you literally can touch them on the butt.
Yeah.
You can't pussyfoot around. You have to just charge in there.
I agree.
Chris, we've covered a lot of ground today. I want to ask you what's going on with the elk module and row hunting resources. I've had several people tell me that they're excited to see some of the new stuff that you've got going on this summer. I know you usually plan in the summer to do behavioral stuff and studying vocalizations. How's your summer looking this year?
It's good. It's going to be a little bit of a different summer as far as work goes. I'm getting the new studio up, trying to get that finished so we can launch into some new stuff. You and I've kind of talked about that, and we'll tease some more about that later. But we've got some new stuff that's going to start hitting the elk module. I've got some videos now that need to be uploaded. So and some of them, the one that I'm interested to see what people think about it is this was down in Arizona. Here we are the last week of September, and I mean not a peep. I mean just not a peep. And you couldn't buy an elk, and it just, you sit there and you wonder, here we are in the most amazing piece of elk country in the United States, and it's dead. Well, some people would get discouraged by that or upset by that. And I just sat there and I had to laugh. I just had to stop and laugh. I'm like, how amazing is this? And I taught, and in the video, I talk about, what's going on. I mean, it doesn't matter if you're private land. It doesn't matter if you're public land. It doesn't matter if you're in a premier unit. There are certain environmental factors that will absolutely flat out affect whether or not elk are going to be active and whether they're not. And if you don't know that and you don't know how to handle that, there's going to be times where you're just standing there dumbfounded, like, I don't know what the heck. Well, don't get discouraged. Don't get discouraged because it's not, someone screwed it up, or they're call shy, they're this or that.
It's that dang moon. It's that dang moon, Chris.
Exactly. It's like the wolves. It's wolves.
The wolves did it.
or too much public pressure. There's too many hikers, or what? You could sit there.
The mountain bikers.
Yeah, exactly. It's all, you can make these excuses that you want, but so no, I'm getting ready to get geared up on to start dumping some new stuff on the module and do just a lot more just yeah, it's going to be fun. I've gotten a lot of good feedback from folks already that they've been out there kind of over the years have gone different avenues of education, and then they jump onto my stuff, and then they're like, my gosh, I didn't realize there was this. I was like, yeah, I told you. I mean, when I say there's like almost 40 hours worth of stuff on there, people are like, yeah, but I didn't realize.
Yeah, the word comprehensive doesn't cover it. It's
Yeah.
like that kind of glazes over the just kind of barely, comprehensive is not even a word that even. But congrats with all that you do with the elk module at Row Hunting Resources, and encourage the listeners to check you out. Chris, as always, I want to give you a chance to let the listeners know how they can find you, how they can follow along and what have you, and I always appreciate you having you on.
No, I love being on here with you, brother. No, just always, it's just Row, it's spelled R-O-E, Row Hunting Resources. And I mean, whether it's social media stuff, Instagram, Facebook, you can look up our YouTube channel that way, and the website is just rowhuntingresources.com. And folks, don't forget that, if you put in the J. Scott Podcast promo code, it knocks 20% off. So you can't, you can't beat it.
We're saving money.
Exactly. See, it's just like anybody else. I saved 20%. So no, and now is about the perfect time too. Quite honestly, this is when a lot of people subscribe, and this is why I do focus on putting a lot of the new material on now, because there is. You can get a full year subscription if you want, but for those people that just want, the cheapest of cheap option. You got the 3-month subscription, and literally you can go July, August, and September. Now you've got 2 months prior to your season, and then you have it through the month of September, and a lot of people utilize that option. And that's why I do start focusing on dumping the new material now, because, so many people are looking for it. So that's always a very, very good option. And for those people that go, oh my gosh, I want more time, well, you can always upgrade. We can always do the full subscription. But no, July, August, and September, this is the push. This time everybody starts getting excited. I'm actually out shooting my bow early this year. I've got a new setup. I'm trying to get my butt in shape again. So awesome. Now it's the crunch time. It's coming quick, man. It's coming quick.
Right on, man. Yeah, they'll be bugling before we know it. Sounds good. I'm looking out the window. We're getting a shower here. Hopefully the shower is hitting this Lake Christine fire a couple miles from my house here. And, it's puddling up pretty good out there. So that's great. Nice. And Chris, as always, thanks for coming on. God bless you, man. I'll talk to you when I get back from my Dull sheep hunts. I guess sounds after good. My first Dull sheep hunt between my second one.
Exactly. Yeah, not a bad problem to have. No, brother, have fun.
That slipped off my tongue pretty good. That was between Dull sheep hunts. I'll probably never be able to say that again in my life. So
yeah, you're living rough right now. I'm telling you, you're living rough.
Yeah.
Cool.
Right
all right,
on,
brother. Be safe. Have fun, and we'll talk soon.
Guys, I want to thank Chris Rowe for coming on and spending time with us. I also would like to thank you guys, the listeners, for all your support of this podcast. I appreciate all of the messages that I've gotten wishing me well on my Dull sheep hunts, and I really appreciate that. We're going to do a lot of great podcasts after I get back from my Dull sheep hunts, and I think you're going to like what I'm going to do with these Dull sheep hunts, how I'm going to chronicle them. I'm going to try and bring the info and the way the hunt goes down right to you. So hope you guys enjoy it and are looking forward to it. Also, I get emails a lot from you guys asking, what can you do for me? You guys do enough. You support me, you support this podcast, and you support the sponsors. And I really appreciate you guys putting an effort to support the sponsors that support this podcast. Guys, until next time, God bless you, and we'll talk to you after the Dull sheep hunts.